And Dr. Sarita, you have the floor.
Fabulous. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our October Global Chamber Los Angeles monthly meetup. Now, today is a unique day. We had a slight shift in the schedule, but just for future reference, normally our meetups are every third Thursday of the month here virtually at 10 o'clock Pacific time. And we have David Harlow, one of our enthusiast supporters on the board, members, Global Chamber Los Angeles member, and we've done quite a bit of work in so many areas when it comes to international trade and tariffs. And so this is actually building off of our previous meetup and other meetings that we've had in between with our board. And so David will join us and give us some insights as it pertains to tariffs. And I think, will non-tariff barriers be a part of this as well, or just the tariffs?
Tariffs and foreign trade zones.
Okay, and the foreign trade zones. Okay, all right. And so I will turn the floor over and, really listen, because one of the things I like about David, it's not just, okay, here are the problems, these are the challenges that we're dealing with, but how do you address those challenges for many of the companies? Okay, so without further ado, I will turn it over to David Harlow.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. Just a quick introduction about myself. My name is David. I'm the president of ITC-Diligence. We're licensed customs brokers and international trade consultants. Our passion, our focus is foreign trade zones and helping companies understand the value, navigate the application process, and provide management oversight. We also provide brokerage solutions and supply chain solutions in that environment. But we love to talk about foreign trade zones, advocate for the industry and the program, as well as making sure people are aware of the different programs and tools available as they navigate their supply chain for importing and exporting. And today I'm going to give everyone a brief overview on the current tariff situation, remind you of some of the historical tariffs that are still relevant, and then also talk about some of the more recent changes that took place last month and even as early as last week. So there's definitely a lot to talk about. But then, as Sarita said, it's always important when we update people on problems or obstacles that there's always solutions and options for people on how to mitigate or navigate those obstacles. And so that's where we definitely will talk about foreign trade zones as well. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Okay. Let me see if I can get some of this stuff off the screen as well. There we go. And my previous presentation was to a group of Asian businesses. So let me get the subtitles off the screen as well. There we go. So I think one thing that I wanted to review are the existing tariffs that we've faced, with the one that actually goes back to 2018. This is during the first Trump administration. This is the Section 301 tariff, which was implemented in 2018. It started off with a 25% tariff. It was reduced to 7.5% for a portion of those products, and then it due to COVID, and then it actually went back up to 25%. And on January 1st of 2025, it some of those items increased to a 50% tariff. I think this is something to also be aware of, is while this was a tariff that was issued in 2018 and was there for the remainder of the Trump administration, the Biden administration kept this tariff. So this tariff continued throughout the Biden administration and has continued to exist under the new Trump administration. So while some of these tariffs may come and go, this is one that continued to stay. It represents approximately 80% of all goods that are exported from China are subject to this Section 301 tariff. The recent litigation that's been going on for a number of years continues to go on. I will say that the proceedings definitely are showing that this is a tariff that most likely will stay long term. The litigation that was in place has not gone as well as maybe the trade has wanted it to. So there's no expectation of this tariff going away or being rescinded at this time. There is duty drawback allowed for this tariff, so that is something companies have an option for. In 2025 is when we really saw an increase in tariffs and how this administration has used tariffs as a way to change international trade policy with the United States. One of the first things was an effort to combat the fentanyl crisis that's being narrated in Canada, Mexico, and in China. This started off with a tariff in China of 10% in February. It increased to 20% in March. What's different about the IEEPA tariff is that there is no duty drawback allowed. So if I pay this fee and then decide to export or destroy my goods, I'm not able to get a refund on this fee like I would with the Section 301 or just with normal duties. So again, that's something to be aware of. In March was busy. The Section 232 tariff on March 12th went into effect for aluminum and steel products. It also expanded to derivatives significantly in August of this year as well. And so this is really important. This is a 50% tariff. There is no duty drawback on this tariff as well. In fact, all Section 232 tariffs don't allow for drawback. So again, this has had a very significant impact on the trade, as you'd be amazed at how much product has a form of steel or aluminum. A lot of products that we're not aware of actually have steel or aluminum, whether it's an oxide or whether it's something that's more visible. A good example of this is when we think of lipstick, we don't think of steel or aluminum, right? Lipstick is definitely a composite, or it's a different product. It's not aluminum or steel. But we forget about the packaging of lipstick. The packaging of lipstick actually has aluminum in it. And so this is an example of lipstick now being imported in the United States is subject to Section 232, with that 50% tariff on the portion of that lipstick that does contain aluminum or steel. Continuing throughout 2025, we saw in April, automotive and auto parts also were assessed a 25% tariff. Again, no duty drawback is allowed on this as well. And then the other thing we saw in April was the reciprocal tariffs initially went into effect on April 4th, and then the very next day, that tariff was paused for 90 days. It actually went into effect on August 7th. So the reciprocal tariffs represent a tremendous amount of countries that are subject to anywhere from a 10 to 41% tariff based on anything that comes out of that country. And again, there is duty drawback allowed on reciprocal tariffs. So think of a country like China, their current reciprocal tariff is 10%. Japan just recently secured a 15% tariff. And so again, this is in effect as of August 7th and continues to be in place. Next is we saw in August as well was a Section 232 tariff on copper. So again, that's a 50% tariff on copper and the derivatives of copper. And so there's definitely a list listing all of the different classifications that may have some form of copper in it that are also subject to this tariff. And again, because it's a Section 232, there is no duty drawback allowed on the copper tariffs. As we get towards the last end of 2025, things definitely haven't slowed down at all. In fact, one of the things that we've been talking about since the first quarter of 2025 is the ongoing investigations of Section 232 on commodities such as semiconductors, timber, pharmaceuticals, and furniture. These investigations almost always turn into tariffs, and that's exactly what we've seen. So pharmaceuticals was on October 1st, but as of last week, it's now changed to November 1st. So forgive me for the date adjustment. These things seem to be changing almost daily or weekly, with pauses or extensions being applied for by the trade or being afforded by the federal government. As of yesterday, timber and furniture saw a tariff against them beginning October 14th for timber and furniture. Semiconductors is another one that I believe that tariff goes into effect on November 1st, but I need to double check that because there's been a lot of movement with that industry as well. So again, all of these investigations have now turned into tariffs. Just as a reminder, the de minimis program did have legislation through the big beautiful bill that ended the de minimis program beginning 2027. And then recently there's been an executive order that suspended the de minimis program effectively from now until 2027. And so again, the de minimis program is no longer allowed. And so we're seeing a lot of companies, a lot of e-commerce companies pivoting to foreign trade zones or to bonded warehouses to manage their supply chain, and with the de minimis program no longer being afforded. And then some of the more recent updates that we've seen. Recently, we saw the IEEPA tariff there was a lawsuit filed against the federal government. This showed that IEEPA was unconstitutional at the circuit court, and then it went to the appellate court where it was also showed to be unconstitutional. And the federal government has now elevated this to the Supreme Court. It's received an expedited approval from the Supreme Court to review this case, which is currently ongoing. The oral arguments for the IEEPA case, and there's actually two cases here, start early November, where there will be oral arguments. There's also been a commitment by the Supreme Court that a decision will be made by the end of December. So by the end of this year, we could either see the Supreme Court saying that the IEEPA tariff is constitutional or is unconstitutional, which will then, create a lot more conversation for the trade on, if this is unconstitutional, how do we get our refunds? When does this go into effect? Those are a lot of open-ended questions that the federal government hasn't been able to answer, much less the administration. So it's really waiting for this decision and then seeing how this all rolls out. So there's still a lot more to monitor and follow for the rest of this year. And then most recently, as of last week, the Chinese government issued tariffs against exported goods that were exporting from the U.S. into China. This then caused the White House administration to retaliate with its own tariffs in response to that. And effective November 1st, all goods coming from China are now subject to 100% tariff on top of their ad valorem duties, on top of the IEEPA duty tariffs that exist, on top of the 301, Section 232, and so on. So again, this creates a very expensive way to import now if this stays into effect. My optimistic hope is that we will see both sides pull back on their recent tariffs, and that's me obviously being an optimist. We unfortunately probably won't find out until the night before, which is Halloween. So we might be taking our kids trick-or-treating and finding out that this is in effect or not in effect. And that's typically what we've seen from this White House administration. So again, I've provided you an update with a lot of information that you may already be aware of. It's always good to have a good reminder, but also some new developments in the last couple of months. So the big question is, with all of this bad news and all of this more expensive ways of importing or exporting, what good news is there to be had. And this is really where the foreign trade zone is the best long-term strategy for businesses to navigate or mitigate tariffs. And we're going to show you how that's possible through the Foreign Trade Zone program. The Foreign Trade Zone program is a program that was developed in 1934 by President Roosevelt. It was developed by the Department of Commerce. What's unique about the Foreign Trade Zone is you can have foreign and domestic goods in your warehouse. Your entire warehouse can be a foreign trade zone, where you can do everything from storage, manipulation, exhibition, exporting, manufacturing, and destroying goods in the FTZ. So you have a tremendous amount of flexibility. There's usually little to no operational impact while you're a foreign trade zone. Like I said, the program was established in 1934 to help get us out of the Great Depression. What are the core benefits of the program? To create and retain jobs, stimulate economic growth, and promote international trade. So again, the top two core benefits is what we look at the most, because this is what drives economic development benefits, which also is part of this administration's narrative. So again, this is a program that in a lot of ways is very aligned to what this administration is trying to do here in the United States, to create and retain jobs and stimulate economic growth. So again, this was impactful back in 1934, but here we are in 2025, and it's just as impactful, if not more impactful, simply because we're a global economy, no longer just a U.S. economy. So who benefits from the program? Really, everyone in the supply chain is going to see a direct or direct benefit. The importers and exporters see the most direct benefits simply because they own the goods, they pay for the goods, they're liable for the goods, thus they get the benefits of programs like the Foreign Trade Zone. But just like any good business, importers and exporters typically will invest those savings back into the business to grow their business model, which has a ripple effect in developing benefits for brokers, freight forwarders, trading companies, trucking companies, and so on. Every time an importer starts to ship more product and have a larger footprint, that means more entries for brokers, more containers for steamship lines, more shipments for trucking companies, and so on. So again, everyone in that supply chain will see that ripple effect that creates benefits. This can even trickle down as far as to the consumer. If that business chooses to reduce their prices because it's less to do business in the U.S., then you could see prices being lowered as well due to the positive impacts of the Foreign Trade Zone program. What industries benefit the most from the Foreign Trade Zone? Really, here are the 9 industries that see some of the greatest benefits. These benefits are usually driven by value, volume, and activity. So when I say value, you look at companies or industries like the automobile and electronics industry. This is high value product that may have a low duty rate, but because the value is high, it drives up that total cost of duty and tariffs. So this is why those industries do well. Alcohol and tobacco are the only 2 industries that are taxed by the federal government. And so on top of paying duties and tariffs, they're also paying a tax. That tax can be upwards of 80%, especially for hard liquor. And then when it comes to apparel and textiles, while they may not be considered high value goods, and there may not be tax on those goods, they do have high duty rates that start at 10 to 30%. And then when you throw on the tariffs, and the average tariffs now, depending on where the product comes from, is close to 100 to 200% in tariffs once you start adding all the tariffs. So again, this is where the Foreign Trade Zone creates a lot of value. Operationally, like I said, there's little to no operational impacts, meaning your warehouse is going to be able to receive goods, manufacture goods, manipulate goods, store goods, and ship goods just like they are today in that environment, because there is no operational impact. Much of the work that's done in a foreign trade zone is done administratively, which happens prior to the goods being received or shipped, or after the goods have been received or shipped. So again, There is no labeling. There is no segregation of cargo. You're able to commingle domestic and foreign goods. You're able to manufacture domestic and foreign goods as well. More and more examples of all different types of industries or commodities that have used foreign trade zones, from perishables to robotics and raw materials. Even tanks and military equipment have used foreign trade zones. But at the end of the day, the reason why companies utilize the foreign trade zone is to create proactive benefits related to those financial advantages, such as cash flow benefits, manufacturing benefits, cost of money, which is exports, and then even some tax exemptions. Just to quickly go through some of these benefits, duty deferral, this is a cash flow benefit. This means that I bring my goods into the United States, I bring them directly into my own facility, that's a foreign trade zone. I'm not paying any duties or tariffs up front. I'm only paying the duties and tariffs when I enter the commerce and deliver to my customers in the US. This used to always be a small to medium-sized business advantage. Large businesses that are making a lot of money don't care as much about cash flow as small businesses do. But now with tariffs being 100 to 200% on top of the normal duty, this has now become a large company benefit as well, and is definitely being paid attention a lot more. Manufacturing. Manufacturing is one of the narratives with this administration, is to incentivize manufacturing. In a foreign trade zone, you do have manufacturing benefits. You are able to manufacture. Some of the recent executive orders have curtailed this benefit a little bit, but the activity of manufacturing can still be done in a foreign trade zone, and all of the other benefits we're talking about are applicable when you're manufacturing. So just to quickly show people what this means is, if I bring in automobile parts at 5%, I manufacture into a finished good that's 2.5%. I'm reducing 50% of my duty in an FTZ environment. I haven't paid anything up front, and I only pay that finished good rate, which is a reduced rate when I deliver to customers in the US. And then next is duty elimination. So this is for the clients that are outside the US. So again, another narrative for this administration is to push and increase exports. The foreign trade zone is aligned really well to help companies that may import raw materials or components, manufacture in their warehouse, and then their customer may be outside the US. And so by doing this in a foreign trade zone, they're not paying any duties or tariffs up front. And after they manufacture the goods, when they ship it to their clients outside the US, they never pay any duties or tariffs. So again, this is one of the biggest driving benefits of the foreign trade zone, to, again, incentivize more and more exports. Keep in mind, 3% of the world's population exists in the United States. That means there's 97% of our customers are outside the United States. So tapping into that consumer market is sometimes more important than tapping into the consumers here in the United States. And using a foreign trade zone helps grow that export program that you may be considering, or helping you develop it even more so that you're able to accommodate more of your customers outside the US by never having to pay these duties and tariffs. And then lastly is the weekly entry program. What's important to remember about this benefit is this is a benefit that has nothing to do with tariffs, but it exists in the FTZ program. It's unique to just the foreign trade zone program. No other federal program offers this benefit. And really what this is a program that was established in 2000, signed into law by President Clinton, and it really capitalizes on the merchandise processing fee that's charged every time you import something into the US. You're going to pay a duty and you're going to pay a merchandise processing fee. This fee caps out at $634, which, by the way, it just increased to $654 about a week ago. And then it allows you, if you are importing about $170,000 worth of goods, you pay the cap of $634. So that means I'm paying for 500 entries over $317,000. If under the weekly entry, I can file one entry per week, where now I'm only paying $33,000 a year. This is a $284,000 savings. This allows e-commerce to exist in the FTZ environment. It allows high volume companies that are shipping a lot of product out on a daily basis into the commerce to streamline their just-in-time concept while seeing sometimes upwards of millions of dollars in savings through a benefit that's only offered in the foreign trade zone and is not related to tariffs. So it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon. Other softer benefits the program offers, which we've talked a little bit about: greater flexibility. Nearly all documentation with the foreign trade zone is in a paperless environment. There's no bond required to bring your goods into a zone, but you do need a bond when entering the commerce. Most people think foreign trade zones have a high security standard, but if you have an alarm system, motion detectors, and cameras, you've met 90% of the security requirements. And then again, there are other ways to avoid quota requirements, such as the sugar industry and others. And then there's ways to bring product in that may not be in compliant. You can adjust it in a foreign trade zone and then make sure you're in compliance when you enter the commerce. So again, those are some more of the reactive benefits. And then for those high volume companies, there's also ways to streamline some of these processes by utilizing direct delivery. There's the Customs Form 214 that you can file on a daily basis if you have high volume. Some of these larger companies are, in the past, were filing, countless 214s for multiple shipments coming in every day. Now they can file one 214 a day. That minimizes that administrative workload. And then you have the flexibility of manipulating and manufacturing goods in your zone without having to ask for permission every time. You're able to file one document a year, perform those activities on an ongoing basis without permission and without reporting that to customs, to allow you to, again, minimize any operational impacts. And then lastly, there's temporary removal and indefinite storage. So I can bring goods into a zone on an indefinite basis. There's companies that have had goods in their zone for 10, 20, 30 years or more. So again, a lot of really good benefits the foreign trade zone offers, especially in this landscape where we have a tremendous amount of trade obstacles. We focus today on tariff-based obstacles. There are non-tariff-based obstacles that the foreign trade zone also can help with, but that's always for another discussion. But again, thank you for your time. Hopefully I've updated you on the current situation of the tariffs and at least given you a little bit more information about foreign trade zones and something to consider in the near future or down the road.
Great. Thank you so much, David, for that comprehensive overview. And if I may start, I do have a question, just two short questions. The latter one you mentioned about the non-tariff barriers, but I do want to ask, okay, so for a small company, mid-sized company, or even some of the larger companies you mentioned that are starting to look at this with everything going on in 2025, can you explain exactly how do I get started? I understand the benefits, right? You've outlined the benefits, why foreign trade zones, but how do you get started? And then what is the time frame is just my first question. And then just quickly, if you could just briefly cover some of the non-tariff aspects of the foreign trade zones, since you brought that up. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And thanks again for the question. So for the first step to get interested in foreign trade zones is really to do an analysis. And there's a lot of entities out there that will do a free cost benefit analysis, such as ourselves. We do this at no cost and no commitment. The purpose is to, one, educate the business about the program, identify what those financial savings are on an annual basis, and then understand what those costs and investments are, because that's important. For a small business, they may not have enough volume to offset the costs and investments of the program. And so it's important to know that before you get too deep into the process. And when that does happen, there are options for small businesses especially. And these are third-party logistics companies that have established themselves as a foreign trade zone. So this wouldn't require you to establish your own facility. It would allow you to walk into a 3PL FTZ where they already have the process in place, and it's just an onboarding process that allows you to quickly start to realize the benefits of the program. But if you were to become your own foreign trade zone, then the process is not something that happens overnight. It's something that usually requires a consultant like ourselves to walk you through that process. It requires a number of different applications that are needed, such as designating your property, activating your business, and then getting production authority for manufacturing benefits. That timeline is anywhere from 6 to 12 months, depending on where you're applying. As an example, in Los Angeles, it's about 10 to 12 months to get approved. But in somewhere like Jacksonville, Florida, believe it or not, it can be done in less than 3 months. And the difference is for the fluctuation in timing has a lot to do with the demand in that industry or that region, as well as the resources that are available in that region. For example, in Los Angeles, there's 2 customs officers that are probably representing anywhere from 50 to 100 applications that have already been filed. And so these applications typically take a few months to get processed and approved. And so you can imagine if there's 100 applications on 2 officers, that creates a pretty big lift. Where in Jacksonville, there's a lot less demand because of the size of the port. There's only 1 officer, but he's actually able to be dedicated to just the foreign trade zone program and process applications a little bit more efficiently just because of his circumstances. And so again, definitely something we can help companies understand what that timing is for each region and and do that analysis so that you can walk into a program like this with your eyes wide open. When it comes to trade barriers, or I'm sorry, non-tariff barriers, I think we've seen some of this. And for example, the most recent one that is close to me is AGOA. AGOA is a trade program that allows companies that are allows companies that are exporting from African countries to not have to pay any duties when they import into the United States. This creates a lot of benefits through economic stimulus in those African countries, as well as creating a better, friendly business environment for companies that want to do business with Africa. This program was actually not renewed at the end of September. And so that's an example of non-tariff barriers that can have an impact on our trade industry, on how we do business with countries all over the world, not just countries like China. So again, definitely something to be aware of. Foreign trade zones can help with those. We have those non-tariff barriers of giving more access, more flexibility, lowering the cost of doing business in the United States that allows companies to still be able to do business there in Africa. So a lot of different obstacles to manage in the FTZ environment.
Great. Thank you so much. And I do want to just, since you mentioned the AGOA, that last month during our meetup, we talked about AGOA as we were waiting to see what was going to happen at the end of September. But as you said, it was not renewed. News reports do indicate there was an interest in renewing for a year, but nothing official. So as for now, we don't have AGOA. So, okay, I guess I can turn it over if anyone else has any questions that's on the call.
I had a question. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure you heard. Cool. You touched on it a little bit and kind of said that this is going to be around for a while, but I'm a little skeptical about that, given this administration's attempts to, whenever someone finds an opportunity, like the way you've laid it out, that they pull the rug out. And so considering that, do you think that this is an opportunity that really will last? Are there ways that the administration can change things so that hopefully not American companies are hurt, potentially foreign companies could be hurt by some of this, but do you see that as a viable concern?
I do, and I think what we have seen here recently is that while I'm not concerned about the foreign trade zone program going away completely, I am concerned, and we continue to advocate where the foreign trade zone program has some restrictions because of executive orders that have been presented this year. For example, anything that's subject to a tariff is mandated to be in privileged foreign status. This curtails manufacturing incentives. It doesn't eliminate the program, but it does restrict some of these benefits. So as this continues to go on with the tariff conversation and the agenda that the White House administration has, it does bring into that conversation, will there be more restrictions with foreign trade zones? Will there be other programs such as bonded warehouses that might also have restrictions? And unfortunately, there's just not a significant amount of transparency to understand where this is taking us and where the foreign trade zone can still be viable to companies and where these tariffs will end up. So again, I think there's still a lot to discover, but right now, and in my opinion, the foreign trade zone will continue to be around for a long time. It's just a question of in what significance and what other restrictions might present themselves with this administration long term.
Got it. Thank you.
You know, one of the things I would also mention too is that the foreign trade zone program is much larger than just the program itself. There's actually a National Association of Foreign Trade Zones. It's a trade association that represents the program as an industry. It advocates on Capitol Hill and with the White House administration about what value the program brings and where there's things the federal government can do to improve the program, as well as just informing the White House administration of the benefits the foreign trade zone offers to really be aligned with some of their narratives, such as bringing more manufacturing to the United States and creating and retaining jobs, stimulating our economy. These are all things that I think everyone in a bipartisan manner agree with. It's just a matter of how do we do this and what programs can be utilized to move this conversation forward.
It's hard to imagine what the crystal ball looks like with trade, given the turmoil of the last few months. But if you had to pull out the crystal ball, what are you thinking about 2026, 2027, 2028? You know, what does trade look like regarding the various tariff and non-tariff barriers that we could be seeing over the next few years? Any surprises in our future?
Well, you know, one of the things that you hear a lot is that there's been a downturn in the import and export activity in the United States. And I don't necessarily agree that there's been a downturn. I just think the way we're importing and exporting has changed significantly. For example, there was a tremendous amount of blank sailings in that second quarter of 2025 due to these tariffs. Then the pause of these tariffs allowed majority of the industry to import more than they ever have in the history of July. So July was a huge month. June, July, and August were really big months for importing. Most companies imported the balance of their inventory for 2025 in those 3 months, which is something that's you've never seen before. We've also seen more and more companies are starting to import their 2026 volumes. I do anticipate the shipping volumes for 2026 to drop a bit, not because there's a lack of demand, but because people are shipping extremely early to try to get inside these pauses of tariffs. Because if these tariffs continue and there isn't a resolution, we could be looking at a very expensive environment, especially in the first 2 quarters of 2026, whether we're looking at 100 to 200% of tariffs. I think the long-term strategy, at least that we've looked at, is these trade negotiations to continue. to evaluate the trade landscape with the United States and the rest of the world that eventually should turn from executive orders into congressional bills that establish tariffs or free trade agreements from a congressional perspective. That may be something we see in the coming years, but time will tell. And politically, what happens with midterms is going to play a big part, as well as Supreme Court decisions. So there's a lot of variables there that make it extremely unpredictable to determine how to strategize your supply chain for years to come. So it's definitely something we have to be mindful of and be agile to be able to shift where there's programs that can help us based on what those political decisions are, unfortunately.
Hey, David, there's a really good question that's in the chat by Ruby Golo from Ghana, our
Yeah.
global chamber in Ghana. Ruby, I don't know if you want to open your mic and ask your question. I want to give you the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Sarita, and thanks to David. Great presentation. So I recently had some conversation with a company based in Virginia. They manufacture brake parts, and they were looking to expand into Africa, specifically Ghana and Senegal. But due to the tariff issues, they are not able to get raw materials from China to produce. Initially, we're looking at them bringing out the finished goods to Ghana because currently we import from China and Dubai. And so for long-term plans, they are looking at setting up a factory in Ghana, which advisably is the best option for them as per the current situation in the US. So I was just wondering, I mean, what is preventing American companies to look into Africa? Because there are lots of opportunities for people to set up their factories and operate locally there. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think, if you go back and look at historically when it comes to global trade, this is an industry that moves slowly and methodically. It's very predictable. We're able to set up and manage supply chains based on what we know is going to happen in very slow ways. And you rarely see changes. An example of this, if you go back to 2023, there was 2 HTS updates by US Customs, meaning the HTS code or the classification was changed twice across all classifications in 2023. Today, we've had countless, I want to say the number is well north of 20 or 25 changes to the tariff code just in 2025. And it's probably even bigger than that. And I think this is really a telling sign, as there's no predictability. There's volatile trade policies that continue to change. It doesn't allow for that transparency. It doesn't allow for businesses to build supply chains based on what they are confident will remain the same or have very little change. So I think the last thing to say is the geopolitics has now used trade as a tool. And so this creates just that much more unpredictability. And that makes it hard for businesses to make significant investments and changes to how they manage manufacturing or distribution when they don't know what's going to happen from one month to the next, or especially from one year to the next. And usually setting up manufacturing operations is not something that's done in months, it's something that's done in years. And so when you have that unpredictability, it's almost impossible for companies to invest in a volatile environment like that. So this is really, I think, an example, like you had said before, Sarita, is it's a non-tariff barrier in that if the unpredictability and the politicization of global trade is definitely deterred how companies do business, especially with the United States. And so I wish I had a better answer for you. I know there's more and more marketability about doing business with Africa. You hear more and more trade associations, companies, industries talking about trade with Africa, which is great to see. And that's not something we saw a lot of prior to these last couple of years. So I keep the conversation going, keep talking about it, keep advocating for more businesses in Ghana and all of Africa. But it's definitely a difficult time to start new ventures. And as we all know, the next frontier of global trade is Africa. And so it's definitely something we want to continue to explore.
Thank you.
All right. Can I just quickly add to that too, with this interesting environment? It does present the opportunities for trade deals with some of the African countries, and then that can also open up the avenue, because the goal was more so for US companies importing. So that can be a potential, just watching to see what happens policy-wise, a potential for getting where it's bilateral or reciprocal if, in that regard, where the US exporters now can export and have some kind of preferential access. So we'll just see what's on the landscape when it comes to these trade deals, so many trade deals that are being discussed. So I just wanted to add to that and then turn it over to Francis as we wrap up.
Hey, thanks, Sarita. David, as always, great information. Quick question, which I don't know if you have time to answer this one, but with trade flows, shipping flows changing in the world, and you mentioned, Jacksonville as a free trade zone that could process things faster. Are there any opportunities in terms of logistics costs, shipping, freight costs, because of the shifting of goods going from different places to do routes?
I guess it really depends on a little bit more detail, but I think we saw this a lot, during COVID and even shortly after, where there was a shift of enormous congestion in LA and Long Beach. And so we saw a lot of business shift to places like Houston, Miami, even New York. And what we saw, though, with that was we saw that those ports then went from having very little congestion to now having a tremendous amount of congestion. So moving from one port to the next didn't fix the congestion problem. It just moved the congestion problem. But, one of the, I think, optimistic things to look at is we look at LA and Long Beach and the enormous congestion that they had in 2021 and 2022. Most people don't realize this, but the year to date, the 1 year that had the most volume ever moved by those ports was actually 2024. And I don't believe anyone can recall any congestion, any delays that happened in 2024. This really pronounces the resiliency of those ports in improving their operations, improving how they invest and build out infrastructure to minimize those congestions. So the busiest year to record, there was no congestion. Where I think the difference was in 21 and 22, you had less infrastructure, you had more people sick. In 2024, more investment to create more infrastructure, and very few people were sick. So that plays a big part. So I think these ports continue to grow and evolve and understand they need to be able to accommodate more volume as things continue. Some of the projections that they have in California is that right now there's about 19 to 20 million TEUs that are received on an annual basis. They're projecting by 2035 or 2040 for that to be close to 40 million TEUs. So they're anticipating to double their volume in less than 20 years. So it's something for us to be aware of. We're seeing more and more companies realizing they don't need to be right next to these ports of entry as well. You're seeing more and more growth regionally and going into areas of the country that typically did not have international trade. A great example of this would be Las Vegas. Las Vegas, we all think of hotels, gaming. Now we think of sports, right? But you'd be surprised. There's now 12 FTZ operators in Southern Nevada. There's countless manufacturers, from pickleball manufacturers to automobile to alternative energy manufacturers to semiconductor manufacturers that are scattered just in Las Vegas, which never would have been a conversation 10 years ago. So these regions continue to evolve through the innovation that we continue to have as an industry to be able to realize these things across the country, not just in certain sectors anymore. So I think that'll lend itself to more logistics. And then maybe the last thing to say, we're finding that logistically, moving things short distances are still expensive, but moving things longer distance have become more affordable. A great example of this is to move something 20 miles from the port of LA and Long Beach usually costs anywhere from $800 to $1,000 to move one container. I moved that same container 2,000 miles away to Las Vegas, and it costs less than $3,000. And so, you know, you're looking at that ratio. It's more affordable to move it to Vegas than it is to move it to the Inland Empire. So, but that's again just how logistics has continued to evolve. And I think it won't stop here. And obviously, all the AI investment is just going to add more and more efficiency as we continue. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, David.
That was amazing. Again, thank you so much, David, for that comprehensive overview, just with reminding us what is going on, what has been going on, and then some of the more recent updates when it comes to tariffs and the role of the foreign trade zones, and then also talking a little bit about the non-tariff barriers. So thank you so much. Again, that was David Harlow, with the president of ITC-Diligence International. And as we wrap up, I will turn it over to the Executive Director, David Harlow of our Global Chamber Los Angeles, for any last words.
Thank you, Sarita. Appreciate your support here and your leadership. And David, fantastic information. Sarita, one of the things that we have coming up for the Global Chamber Los Angeles is a week from Thursday. A week from tomorrow, Anita Rodal has our monthly export-import forum, and she'll have fellow Southern Californian Bill Edwards with nearly 50 years of trade. Today, we heard a lot about tariffs and how to mitigate those challenges. On the 23rd, it'll be about non-tariff barriers, and Bill is about as expert as you can get. Sarita, you've worked with Bill now for quite a while. Undoubtedly, that's something that I'm sure you're going to be hoping to fit into your busy schedule. You've got a lot on your plate, I know, but undoubtedly you'll be either live or watching the recording. So thank you for that, and thanks to Anita for pulling that together. That came, I think, about through our advisory board meeting, our last board. It was like, we need to talk about non-tariffs, and Bill stepped up, so we appreciate it. Does anybody have any final comments? We did have a couple of other speakers, but they didn't show up. But it was loose. It was very loose relative to David. We knew David was going to come. Eduardo, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it would be great to just give a heads up as to our next speaker for the next monthly meetup for November.
That's a great idea. Thank you. I also wanted to give a shout out to Eduardo Gonzalez, who is the Executive Director for Global Chamber for Mexico, more holistically. In addition to the Mexico City chapter, where Gabriel Uribe is just doing an amazing job as Executive Director, Eduardo has a more holistic view. He's based in Phoenix, but he knows Mexico. So relative to any manufacturers on both sides of the border, Eduardo is very well connected. So our next meeting of this is November. Let's see when that is. So Christine Peterson is the director at the Economic Development Group for International at the City of Los Angeles, and she'll be our speaker on the 20th of November. I don't see a particular topic, but she will be talking about international economic development for LA. She and I had a great conversation recently about sports, international sports. That's a huge topic for LA because not only are there matches from the World Cup coming up, but there's a Super Bowl coming up. There could be a World Series coming up. Okay, that could very well happen, very likely will happen multiple times in the next several years. And then in 2028, of course, the Olympics. and we will be involved one way or another with that. So she'll be talking about a variety of different topics. So you don't want to miss that. November 20th, same time, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you, Sarita. Would you like to have the last word?
Well, yeah, I just hope to see everyone on November 20th. And also, I just want to add that that is a very important topic. And then during one of our monthly meetups, we had Christina Espiritu, who talked about the procurement opportunities as we have these large events that are coming to the city of Los Angeles. So it will be great to hear what Christine Peterson has to say on November 20th. And just a quick, if anyone to follow up to the discussion about sports and the procurement opportunities here in Los Angeles, there's an event, looks like there's quite a bit on October 23rd as well, put on by the city of Los Angeles for companies that are looking to leverage the opportunities here in the city of Los Angeles. So I just want to point that out. And other than that, thank you so much for joining us, Eduardo. I will be talking to you because USMCA is a huge topic as well, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, even though we have that agreement, all of these changes and the upcoming reviews. So I will talk to you about that for perhaps maybe to speak at a meetup to give us an update there. And then is it Thierry? Am I pronouncing that properly? Thank you for joining us from Utah.
That's it, Terry.
Terry, okay. And thank you, Ruby, Francis, always nice to see you. Thanks for joining and participating. Thank you, Doug, and especially David for that very insightful presentation and practical presentation.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.